The lion in the wild says, roar, roar, roar. The elephant in the wild says, trumpet, trumpet, trumpet. The zebra in the wild says, neigh, neigh, neigh. The giraffe in the wild says, hum, hum, hum. The gorilla in the wild says, thump, thump, thump. Boo! Trumpet! Hum, thump, thump. The hippo in the wild says, splash, splash, splash. The crocodile in the wild says, snap, snap, snap. The rhino in the wild says, snort, snort, snort. The leopard in the wild says, growl, growl, growl. The monkey in the wild says, ooh, ooh, ah, ah. Splash, snap, snort, growl. Ooh, ah. The flamingo in the wild says, honk, honk, honk. The ostrich in the wild says, boom, boom, boom. The baboon in the wild says, bark, bark, bark. The antelope in the wild says, bleat, bleat, bleat. Honk, boom, bar, bleat. The meerkat in the wild says, chirp, chirp, chirp. The snake in the wild says, hiss, hiss, hiss. The warthog in the wild says, grunt, grunt, grunt. The wildebeest in the wild says, moo, moo, moo. Chirp, hiss, grunt, moo. The jackal in the wild says, howl, howl, howl. The owl in the wild says, goot, goot, goot. The camel in the wild says, groan, groan, groan. The porcupine in the wild says, squeak, squeak, squeak. Howl, hoot, growl, squeak. The hyena in the wild says, laugh, laugh, laugh. The peacock in the wild says, scream, scream, scream. The kangaroo in the wild says, dot, dot, dot. The panda in the wild says, chomp, chomp, chomp. The penguin in the wild says, stop, stop, stop. Laugh, scream, thud, chomped, squawk. The cheetah in the wild says, zoom, zoom, zoom. The koala in the wild says, snore, snore, snore. The raccoon in the wild says, chatter, chatter, chatter. The sloth in the wild says, sigh, sigh, sigh. The toucan in the wild says, croak, croak, croak. Zoom, snore, chatter, sigh. The buffalo in the wild says, bellow, bellow, bellow. The eagle in the wild says, screech, screech, screech. The frog in the wild says, ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. The tortoise in the wild says, stop, stop, stop. Bellow, screech, ribbit,